Welcome back to the Inner Slot Podcast, episode number 17. As always, joined by me, Josh, Henry, Connor, and Chris. Connor, before the pod, we were just talking about this week's Inner Slot Buster. You've got to admit for the viewers, what happened there?
What do you mean what happened there? I had a minor blip where I might have not placed the name of the person down, and I had to actually break down the clue myself. But luckily enough, I was able to do that because it was a top tier clue, which led me straight into the name. So it is a viable game that everyone can play, including myself, who has had a busy week. So yeah, to kind of build everyone in from that part, every week I run a game with the guys, so Josh, Chris, and Henry, about all of essentially it's a game show that I do which breaks down a cryptic clue of a player who's around the NFL, might be joining the NFL through the draft, might be a commentator, might be an ex-pro. Anyone who's involved in the NFL, I ask the guys to break it down, and essentially I give them the chance each week to actually tell me what their thought processes were throughout the week. So the clue that I gave the guys last week was, you might find me looking for animals, or more specifically, chickens. So over to you guys. Let me hear what you've got.
Thanks, Connor. Nice to hear you prove that even you can solve one of the clues. I know I have
a wholesome game for the whole family.
Yeah, well, thanks for covering whilst I had something stuck in my throat. I did my usual thing of not bother to guess the clue because I got something close enough that I was happy with. My standards seemed to be slipping each week. I just went down the chicken line, picked Sanders because, Colonel Sanders, KFC, and just came up with Barry Sanders and Emmanuel Sanders. So just thought I'd add that to the mix.
I'll give my thought process, although I have been informed that I don't think this is along the right lines. So my answer was Jameis Winston, and my thought process behind that was, if you're looking for animals, a J is an animal, like we had with JJ Watt previously. You're missing the J, so you're looking for it. And then the surname with Winston, like wing, like a chicken wing. So that was what I went for. I thought that was going to be right, but not looking like it is it, Connor?
You were very confident, but no, it's not right.
Somehow Barry Sanders was better. Somehow.
I was going along the lines of, my first thought was something about looking or hunting for the animals. So I was thinking maybe it could be Hunter Henry, but obviously Henry doesn't follow with chickens, so that I disagreed with that. Then I thought maybe who looks after a fox? Who looks after chickens? Who hunts for chickens? Maybe it's a fox. Then I thought that there's nobody that I could think of with fox in the name. And then I thought, well, chicken's a bird. Maybe it's the mere bird, but that doesn't fit the first bit. And then I even went a bit off more tangent. And apparently Von Miller owns his own poultry farm. Did you guys know that?
I did not know that. No.
I went proper off route with that one. It really stumped me, but Hunter Henry was my first thought, and then I ended up at Von Miller. So you've got a selection to choose from there, Connor.
I think it's fantastic that this game show has also become a platform to educate us and all of our listeners that Von Miller, and it's great marketing for Von Miller. If anyone wants to get some chicken, you don't know where to go. What answer are you going to submit, Chris? Because I'm interested, as you can only submit one.
Well, I'll go with Hunter Henry, because the first one I wrote down on my list of about 3 or 4 options.
Then you would be absolutely right.
Really?
It is Hunter Henry.
Oh, wow.
Enlighten us,
the
Connor.
second one?
Hunter.
Hen.
Exactly, and hen.
I'm good.
I was ready to steal that one.
James Winston was better.
I saw the moment of realization on Josh's face there as Chris said, nothing relates to chicken. He almost saw hen come out of his brain. But yeah, that was it for this week.
Thanks, Connor. Yeah, that was nice. Watch us all try and get there. and all believe we had the right answer, except for me. I didn't think I had the right answer.
I like the thought process though, and for everyone who is listening, that is the thought process. Like everyone kind of goes down. The clues can obviously lead you in multiple different places. That's the idea. So it's great to hear how everyone picks it apart differently. So if you are thinking of guessing, or if you do want to take part, then leave a comment in the comment sections below on YouTube, or equally if you follow us on Twitter, do the exact same.
Thanks, Connor. And obviously, we'll be back to you after we go through the next section. We can hear this week's In the Slot Buster. Just to bring us back to more of a tangent, you know, we're in the middle of the off season. Interest is kind of at different points. Obviously, we just had the franchise tag market, but we did breakdowns of draft groups, the skill position players. So we did wide receivers, including Kyle Pitts. We did running backs last week. This week, we're going to do quarterbacks. You know, by far the most important position in the NFL. And so it kind of begs that question of who's the next best guy. So I asked the guys to take a look, give us a thought of where they think their 1 to 5 ranks. So rather than what we've done previously, which is just kind of work through really gradually, we'll all take it in turns and just say who our number 1 pick is, and then do our top 5 down the list, and then we'll kind of discuss further. So first of all, Chris, who is your quarterback 1 in this draft class?
Trevor Lawrence.
Yep. Connor, who's your quarterback 1?
Trevor Lawrence.
Trevor Lawrence. Henry, quarterback 1?
Yeah, not even going to attempt a joke. Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah. Okay. My list doesn't quite break down the same way. I've got a 1.1A and a 1.1B. But 1.1A is Trevor Lawrence. So I think we can all agree he is the best quarterback in this draft. What the gap is between number 1 and number 2, maybe we disagree on. But, you know, the writing was on the wall, wasn't it, Henry? Trevor Lawrence coming out of high school, one of the highest recruits. Had an incredible freshman season, true freshman season, winning the national championship. And, you know, he's been there and around there each of the subsequent years. It's always tough to maintain that level, but is that kind of the basis for you with this analysis of Trevor Lawrence?
I think so. I think we talked about a lot the final 4 quarterbacks that were left in the NFL playoffs, and 3 of those players in Rodgers, Mahomes, and Allen have ridiculous tools, but also ridiculous in terms of their ball accuracy, placement, reads, progressions, things like that. And I think Lawrence has the potential to be in that kind of category where he has all of the tools, the size, the arm, mobility, running ability, all of that stuff, but combined with the ball accuracy, the placement, knowledge of the game, and all of that. And like you said, Josh, he's done it at the top level of college football for 3 years, started as a true freshman, won the national championship as a true freshman. And yeah, for me, he hasn't done anything throughout those 3 years to sway my mind that he should be the number 1 overall pick. And one of the top prospects that we've seen in the last 10 years.
Yeah, and it's not often that a college player gets to demonstrate true consistency. Typically, you know, the cycle as it goes through, you don't come in as a true freshman, and you don't stay there for 3 years because, you know, you have a really good season and you declare for the draft to capitalize on that. And Trevor Lawrence couldn't declare for the draft until after this season. Still played through COVID, obviously still hoping for another national championship, which is a knock which are on some of the other quarterbacks in the class, but, you know, incredible consistency, something we haven't seen for a long time. But let's go with the pro comparison for Trevor Lawrence. You know, for me, it's 2020/2021 Josh Allen, the Josh Allen we just saw this season. Does anyone have any pro comparisons they want to add to the mix?
I think the Andrew Luck comparison is really interesting. Slightly different body types. Luck was a lot bulkier, sort of a lot more of a power runner, whereas Lawrence has got a little bit more speed. I think Luck has a bit of a stronger arm, but Lawrence's is still exceptional. But I think possibly Lawrence is even further along in terms of running on a football field, working through progressions, all of that kind of stuff. So I think Luck's a very intriguing comparison for Lawrence. I think Josh Allen, I've been convinced, is just such a freak of an athlete at that size. But yeah, I think the upper end of Lawrence could be reaching those Josh Allen levels. And I think the nice thing about Lawrence is his floor is really high as well. worst case scenario, I think he's still, Josh Allen from earlier in the season, maybe.
For me, I thought Zach Wilson actually reminded me of Josh Allen, the way that he's got the strength and his mobility. So it's interesting you compare Trevor Lawrence to that, Josh.
Yeah, I'm pleased you brought up Zach Wilson because, I'll go first and I'll give you my top 5. And Zach Wilson for me is 1.1B. I think in any other draft class, at least going back until Kyler Murray's draft class, he would be the number 1 quarterback for me easily. I just think he brings so much. And I would actually beg the question, if Zach Wilson had been playing at Clemson and Trevor Lawrence had been playing at BYU, would they be the other way around? And I honestly think they would be. I think he is a true quarterback that changes the league. I was looking for a pro comparison and I just couldn't find anyone that really fits. There's a bit of rust, the improvisation in there. I've seen people comparing him to Patrick Mahomes. And obviously you've got Kyler Murray as well. You look for the smaller build, athletic, mobile, improvising quarterbacks, but really he's in a mold of his own, in my opinion. I agree with the comparison to Josh Allen to some degree as well. I think any good quarterback would draw comparisons to any good quarterback in the NFL. But yeah, I don't think he really has a true pro comparison, which just pays such testament to what he's done. So yeah, I actually probably would prefer to take Zach Wilson over Trevor Lawrence. I'm not going to do that from the Jags. Henry made the exact point that everyone will, which is the floor. Where is the floor for Trevor Lawrence? And it's so much higher than any quarterback we've seen recently, except probably since we had Andrew Luck, that you would be stupid not to take him. There's no point gambling when you don't need to. Maybe the upside doesn't quite end up the same way, but that's coaching. That's a lot of other things which are not within that prospect's control. But yeah, I love Zach Wilson. So he's my 1.1B. 1.3 is Mac Jones. I've been growing on the guy so much. And we'll talk about him, I'm sure. Justin Fields is my 1.4. I think he's had a bit of a bounce back in my mind as people have started to wake up to him and we've probably seen his genuine value. I've started to grow on him a bit more. He's got all the tools, but there's just some real conservative quarterback play, some real nervousness. And then my 1.5, and this is probably the biggest shocker of all of them, that is Kellen Mond from Texas A&M, who looks incredible. It's easy to look at highlight tape and love a prospect. I will be completely honest. I haven't seen every single game, every single snap, so I couldn't tell you what his downs look like, but his ups are right up there. Zach Wilson level ups, in my opinion. Chris, what's your 1 to 5?
I've actually got exactly the same as you, apart from Kellen Mond. I've not looked through his film just yet, but I also have Zach Wilson at number 2. Like I said, he reminds me of the Josh Allen with his the way he plays, and every time he seems to go deep and he's got a huge arm, he's still very, very accurate from what I saw. Like you said, highlights always play up to that. But I did like that deep ball that he's got. Then I had Mac Jones at 3. My opinion, watching back when he had the college pro games and stuff in the sort of finals there, it was quite high. He had the big game, the 6 touchdowns, I think it was, against Clemson, and then comes back down when the hype just sort of fades away. Because for me, he doesn't seem to wow you. I don't think Matt Jones didn't wow you, but he had so many talented skill players, Devonta Smith, Jalen Ward. I know he was injured, but Najee Harris, lots of different players he could throw the ball to. So it's difficult not to look good, but I don't think he necessarily wowed you. So somebody like, I don't know, like a Matt Ryan, for example, very consistent, or was consistent, and then he's kind of faded now a little bit. But Matt Jones was 3 for me. So I could see him doing well at the Falcons, actually, when I mentioned that there. Then Justin Fields, 4, great mobility, had a really good, obviously, end to the college season, ability to make a play, loves to avoid a tackle. And then I had Trey Lance, 5. Now, I know you played, and you guys will probably know a bit more about this sort of lesser division, but this guy, great physicality, really difficult to bring down. He almost looks like a combination for me of Cam Newton and Lamar Jackson. Obviously not as quick, but just so physical.
Thanks, Chris. Henry, what about for you? Where do your top 5 sit?
Yeah, I've got a couple of differences to you guys. For me, yeah, I love Zach Wilson as well. Big fan. He's my second quarterback on the board at the moment. I think I do agree with you, Josh. I think he would have been the top pick in many drafts. I think he's on that sort of, interestingly, how you grade out him versus Joe Burrow, perhaps that's the kind of level that I view him on at the moment. It takes a special talent to be taken above him, like Trevor Lawrence. My comp for Zach Wilson was actually like Aaron Rodgers light, which is high praise coming from a Packers fan, but I think that's where his real top end ceiling is. Similar sort of physical stature and build. And some of the throws where he's rolling right and throwing back across his body to the left, that really did remind me of Aaron Rodgers. Really nice release, really nice quick release, which I think is a massive part of being successful in the NFL today. Trevor Lawrence has that as well. And he was much more athletic than I thought when looking at the tape, like really, really, really athletic as a runner, not just scrambling to evade pressure. So was impressed. And I saw that as well, Josh, there are a couple of people who agree with you now. I saw Chris Sims had him as the top quarterback, and I think there's a couple of others. So we'll see if that builds. 3 is actually Justin Fields for me. I think that's almost becoming an unpopular opinion now, where he started at number 2 and now he's down to a lot of people's number 4. So yeah, I was actually really impressed going back and watching the tape on Fields. I thought the arm strength, his size, mobility, and his deep ball all looked really good. It's definitely a slower release. It's a slower wind up, which does concern me a little bit. All those successful quarterbacks we talked about have such quick releases, but definitely sort of a more freakish athlete than I expected, both in terms of throwing the ball and running. I was expecting him to be a little bit more slow, lethargic, but I think Fields would be massively successful. Then I had Mac Jones at 4, and I did have I had a Trey Lance, and then I did have Slash. I just wanted to mention him, is Jamie Newman from Wake Forest. Do like Jamie Newman. I think he's got potential to catch on in the NFL. And I liked watching his tape. I thought he was a good deep ball thrower and a powerful runner. So I did like Jamie Newman. Trey Lance went down in my estimations. The standard just looked like watching these guys back to back to back, and you hear people talking about the lower level, but the standard, when you watch it, it does look so different. It looks like, us 4 could be on defense for some of these teams. It's looking so easy for him. He looks like Derrick Henry playing in high school. Like it looks so easy. So that was a much more difficult evaluation for me, and that would give me pause when considering whether to take him as high as some of these other guys.
I've also seen with Trey Lance there as well that I like having looked through like a lot of like mock drafts through the week, like some of them for him actually valued quite higher than a lot of other QBs, just based on situational needs of teams, which I thought was really interesting for him, because I thought the same sort of thing with Lance, that he might drop a little bit further, and that there is that actual between the top 3 and then under that, I think there is a like more of a significant drop off. And I suppose it then depends where your top 3 is, because obviously I think for me, Mac Jones is probably up there maybe. So maybe I'm being a bit harsh with top 3. But then after that, it does drop off where you are starting to look further down in the draft class, potentially down into the second round, whereas the other ones are like top 10 picks. And that's kind of the stark difference you're seeing. But a lot of people's mock drafts are valuing these QBs so differently at the moment. I think the one consistency is Trevor Lawrence being right up there at number 1 in every single mock I've seen. And like Henry said, it would just be a joke if you put anyone else there. Like he's got to be the guy who's there. So no, it's really interesting on him as well.
Yeah, thanks, Connor. And yeah, Trey Lance is the perfect example of overvaluing traits. I think his pro comp is, it's not quite Cam Newton, but it's that style of build, throw power and everything. But I completely agree, Henry. The game is so much slower. at the second tier of college football. But what you really want to see from a top prospect is some clinical decision making, and he just has so much hesitation. Just such a conservative player. He was so tightly gripping onto this, this view of 0 interceptions, and it was like that was driving him rather than wins, rather than anything else. Maybe he didn't have much else to aim for, but I really, for me, Trey Lance is 1.6. I had Jamie Newman 1.7. I agree, Henry. I would probably rather have Jamie Newman over Trey Lance. Even the only quarterback who I evaluated who I think is worse than everyone is Kyle Trask, and I honestly thought he was just terrible. How on earth he was in the Heisman consideration is just embarrassing. That speaks to how good Kyle Pitts and Kadarius Toney are, more than Kyle Trask. But pro comps on Mac Jones, I actually view him very similarly to Joe Burrow. I think they had very similar seasons. You look at Joe Burrow, he went to LSU, had a very successful season with a great team built around him. And he had a great offensive line and everything. And Mac Jones had pretty much the same scenario. Joe Burrow went from Ohio State, transferred to LSU, and then had a great season. Mac Jones just waited in the wings in Alabama. Everyone assumed he wasn't going to be the quarterback this year. Had a meteoric performance. Really set a lot of record books. And if it hadn't been for Devonta Smith being such a component of that offense, he probably would have been the Heisman winner. I'm confident of that. So yeah, I really could not be high enough on Mac Jones, in my opinion. Yeah, sorry, Henry.
Yeah. For me, that's interesting to see, because I think we were talking a lot about this last week, just off the pod, that we're all sort of, our opinions of Mac Jones are only climbing. But for me, I didn't see that on the tape. I didn't see that high end level for Burrow. I didn't see the potential. The arm strength, the size, the mobility. There was some nice ball placement, particularly on deep balls. Got some really nice ball placement, but the receivers are so open. And a lot of the times, what I found with some of the top guys, and I was impressed with Fields as well, is even though the receiver's like 3-4 yards open, the accuracy's right there, right in the face mask, right on the chest. Didn't see that as much with Mac Jones. For me, my pro comp, the high end would be Kirk Cousins. I think that's what he can aim for, and that's not an insult. People, Kirk Cousins sometimes becomes a bit of a joke, but this is a guy who's led many teams to the playoffs, has a winning record, and played at a high level. So that's my pro comp for Mac Jones. Yeah. Just to quickly touch on Kyle Trask there. Wow, that was fun. It was fun to watch his highlights, but not really because of Kyle Trask. Kadarius Toney, getting to watch more of him. I'm so excited for him in the draft, and Kyle Pitts was just unbelievable. And there was a player who I didn't really know that much about, but they had a wide receiver called Grimes, who just looked like an absolute monster. So I'm going to have a look back at him and have a look through that as well, because he really caught my eye on the tape.
Amazing. Thanks, Henry. And I'm so pleased we're touching on players who stood off, because if you haven't watched Kellen Mond's tape, please watch Kellen Mond's tape, and purely for the reason that there's a guy called Aeneas Smith. He's a running back. He had about twice as many receiving yards as he did rushing yards this season. Played about 6 games. I think total combined yardage over those 6 games is about 700 yards. 7,000 would be very impressive. But he was always the deep threat. And this is a running back. I think this guy is going to redefine the position when he hits the NFL. I've not been excited for a running back since that, for a long time to that level. But yeah, Texas A&M, loved his production, loved Kellen Mond. Definitely one to look out for on a draft. Great. Connor, why don't you take us through this week's In the Slotbuster? Game week number 16.
Absolutely. So you guys know the gist of the game now. I won't go through it again this podcast. So I'll just take you straight into the cryptic clue for you to all guess along at home, for the guys to pick up on and have a think about coming into this week. And then, yeah, you have until about 8 p.m. on a Wednesday to get your answers in. So do let us know by then. So that gives you a good week or so to get this done. So this week's cryptic clue is: you may see me fighting you may see me fighting a dragon, or you may see me with the entire team's jersey. So I'll say that one more time. You may see me fighting a dragon, or you may see me with the entire team's jersey.
Interesting. Got some lines I'm already going down. We'll come back to you. You'll remind us of it later. Maybe by then we'll have guessed it. But yeah, thanks, Connor.
Yeah.
What we wanted to do this week was, other than rank quarterbacks in the NFL draft, we talked about it after our podcast recording last week. This Russell Wilson situation. And I think the guys really wanted to put me on the hot seat as a Seahawks fan in the group. So what I'll do, I'll relinquish control to Henry. You guys can, act like you're Piers Morgan before he quit and drill me about Russell Wilson.
That really puts me off speaking now, to act like I'm Piers Morgan, but I will ask you a few questions, Josh.
I'll be Meghan Markle, that's fine.
Right. Okay. This is an interesting segment of the show, but yeah. So essentially, I think earlier than anyone else, Josh, you were of the belief that it was a real possibility that Russell Wilson would be traded. I think us three were thinking it's not going to happen. It doesn't happen unless you're the Texans and you manage to mess everything up spectacularly. Franchise QBs of this age and ability don't leave. Doesn't happen. But it seems like there's a lot more to it than we expected. And it seems like those concerns or the feelings that you had about Wilson leaving seem like they have a much higher chance of being true. So right now, Josh, my first question is percentage that he is the starter game one, snap one of the 2021 regular season. What's your confidence that he'll be starting for the Seahawks?
60%, 65%. It's probably gone up slightly since then because we've had a week to kind of mellow thoughts, but I would say somewhere in that 50 to 65% range.
Okay, so still probable, but definitely you're not confident, which is interesting. Okay, what about in terms of if it does come out, it's not going to work. Seahawks are, I think your opinion is the Seahawks are getting fed up with Russ as well as the other way around. Is that similar? That's kind of what you're thinking at the moment, Josh?
Yeah. Do you mind if I jump in and just give
go
some
for it.
organizational context? Obviously, Seahawks suffered a massive Super Bowl loss at the 1 yard line, one of the most infamous recent plays. After that point, they lost a lot of the locker room. And the reason they lost most of the locker room, everyone thought Marshawn Lynch should be given the ball, as I think everyone in hindsight says should have happened. Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, multiple leaders on this team, including Cam Chancellor, who released a piece this offseason as well, all really dissuaded at that point and, lost interest, faith in the organization. And what everyone believed was the common point was that the organization, Pete Carroll in particular, had backed Russell Wilson to the point where it put Russell Wilson and his bid to be the Super Bowl MVP ahead of the team and their needs and their chance to win the Super Bowl. And so that's the context of this organization. Quite clearly they've backed Russell Wilson because Richard Sherman's no longer there. Marshawn Lynch retired and went to Oakland. And Earl Thomas left and flipped off the sidelines, right? We all know all about it. Cam Chancellor got injured, but Cam Chancellor is a different beast because he puts the organization first in a different way. But that's the situation for this organization. Now they've got someone who, through personal changes in their life, suddenly have an external influence. Let's be honest. I think Ciara, I don't know how you pronounce her name, has had some influence there, developing a bit more of a personality for Russ. He wants to stand up for what he thinks is right. And, he's kicked out the hand that fed him even. Now this organization, they're looking at the spoiled brat of a child that doesn't appreciate everything that was given to him. And I'm a Seahawks fan, and I feel the exact same way as the organization. I love Russell Wilson, everything he's done for the organization. But you look back at the past few years, they haven't come close to repeating that, winning a Super Bowl. They've threatened, but they've never been anywhere there. So is Russell Wilson the guy? Like, what more do you change in the system? And I I don't think he is. I don't think they win a Super Bowl with Russ. Drastically changed since the start of the season. And if that's the case, why not cut loose? Why not get rid of the guy?
I honestly, I find it so interesting you saying this as well. Like, and if we are treating this as let's speak to Josh and find his thoughts. I've known you since uni, and you, like, one of my earliest memories of you is essentially getting me into NFL and the high praises of Russell Wilson, like genuinely saying to me that he was like the next best thing in the NFL. He was going to do wonders for the Seahawks, everything. All positivity, like no downside essentially. So for you as a Seahawks fan who had that much love for a quarterback coming into the team, had those opportunities, obviously, like you said, the big disappointment on that Super Bowl 1 yard touchdown disappointment. How, like, what is, like, how disappointed are you in Russell Wilson now, like taking into consideration how high you were in him? Like, is it a shit, like, clear disappointment, or is it for you things have now changed and let's just start fresh and get someone new in?
I think it's mostly a frustration. I think the thing which is apparent about Russell Wilson, we've discussed it, he always talks the talk in his press conferences, always shared responsibility. He always takes the broad shoulders and owns up to it. And yet this is a guy who this offseason has come out and said, you haven't given me enough protection. They invested in offensive line like every season for the past 8 seasons in the draft. Yeah, okay, they take random players, but that's what the Seahawks do. That's how KJ Wright, Richard Sherman, who was a converted receiver, turned into one of the top cornerbacks in the league. This isn't a team that takes an offensive line talent for an offensive line talent. They see a defensive tackle and think that guy could be a great guard. And J.R. Sweezy is still in the league. It doesn't always work. Most of the time it won't work because you've got a mad scientist. But yeah, for me, honestly, Connor, I'm just sat here and just thinking, at what point does this man own up and accept responsibility and actually step up, which I don't think he's done since that point when he was suddenly being handed the keys to the team.
For me, Josh, it's really, really surprising for you to almost use those words, spoilt brat, because I'm exactly the same boat as Connor. You, ever since we've been talking NFL together, going back over the years, you've always been a massive Russ fan, and converted myself and loads of other people, I'm sure. And for you, Josh, for you to go out and say maybe he's acting like a spoiled brat, that's tough. That's really shocking to hear. So on a personal level, do you want Russell Wilson back?
Oh, that is a good question.
Good question.
Yeah,
Chris.
that cuts straight to it. I'll be honest, this is one that I've been debating for probably the past 2 weeks since the sort of rumors surfaced. And probably the whole reason why my perspective is what it is I would rather see a new team built around a new quarterback than a team with Russell Wilson. Don't get me wrong. If Russell Wilson and the team work it out like most organizations do, then I'll be fully behind Russell Wilson. I'll be fully behind the Seahawks. But, as a Seahawks fan, it hasn't been the case for a long, long time that we've got to kind of consider the tantalizing opportunity of a new quarterback. Most teams, I'm sure they wouldn't wish they were in that spot, but get to look ahead each year at the draft, see which quarterback prospects are there, and they mean something to their organization. This year, I felt that for the Seahawks. So, yeah, we talked about how exciting those prospects are in the draft, and I'm really high on a lot of them. And so, yeah, part of me would definitely love to see a new quarterback in town.
Very interesting there. Yeah, so just to give a bit more context on the Seahawks previous, like the last few years since that Super Bowl, they've made the playoffs 5 out of 6 years, but only 3 playoff wins in 6 years, with supposedly one of the best quarterbacks of the last 20 years. Invariably the Super Bowl era. When you won that Super Bowl in 2013, it would have been, how many can we get? And now we're 6 years later, and you haven't even made it close. So, all right, Josh, one step further then. Let's imagine the relationship's fractured. It's not going to happen. Whether the Seahawks think it's because his play isn't good enough or because the relationship just has been severed, even though they think he's a good player. what would you be happy with as a trade package? Do you want a pick in this draft? Do you want players? What are your thoughts? What as a Seahawks fan would you be happy with?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a tough question. I sat there and I thought, maybe the Dolphins would be a good trade spot, but that doesn't work without getting Tua in return. And I hate Tua. I'll be honest, I would not take Tua unless you flip him and take something with the third pick, which is a legitimate spot. I quite like the prospect of Justin Fields in Seattle. I did talk about him, I'm not the highest on him out of the crop, but I think his value right now is lower than his actual NFL worth, if that makes sense, or his caliber. So, yeah, I think if you get rid of Russell, you have to have a go at a quarterback in this draft class. I think it's unacceptable not to do that and get a quick turnaround. I don't think I would be happy trading for anyone. Deshaun Watson's there. I wouldn't say no to Deshaun Watson for Russell Wilson, of course. I don't think it comes down to draft picks because I don't think the Seahawks have drafted well in the first round for a long time. So I'd sooner see them take a valuable trade asset or take a draft pick, which is specifically one of those quarterbacks, knowing there's not really a wrong choice for the top 4.
Excellent. Well, hopefully we'll get to see how that plays out over the next few weeks. It's going to be happening very, very shortly if the trade does happen, I imagine. I can't imagine a draft day trade for Russell Wilson, although that would be pretty epic. But yeah, maybe we'll put together a few trade packages for you, Josh, maybe next week, just to see if you'd say yes or no to them.
Yeah, that would be really good fun. I would love to see that. I actually started a new Madden franchise with the idea. Played around too much in the draft, didn't get a quarterback I wanted and gave up. But yeah, no, I'd love to see that. Love to see that concept. I'm excited, genuinely excited to see what happens this off season. So yeah, at least you got to take the positives. But let's talk about the updates that have happened. Obviously, we just had the franchise tag deadline, so a lot of players got tagged. Before that, Chris, who usually is our COVID and injury expert, has been keeping his ear to the ground for some player updates. A few releases this afternoon. Obviously, first thing, Dak Prescott got his money. Connor, how do you feel?
Couldn't be happier. I know I've branded him as being great for us previously. I absolutely love the guy. I think he's been brilliant, and his stats from last season spoke for himself before he got injured. I think all of us just had our fingers crossed that he was gonna not have a career-ending injury, because it potentially looked that way when it first happened, and you could see how much he's loved around the NFL as well. Like players from every team coming around to wish him support and hoping that he got essentially paid, and it's finally happened for him. It's brilliant that it has, and I think really it's a move from the Cowboys to hopefully set just some strength and solidity into the offense now going into the season without that over the shoulders of is Dak going to stay, is Dak going to leave because we can't pay him enough. But it's finally happened, and I think it's fantastic to have him there, and yeah, let's see what next season brings with him.
Yes, Connor, Dak now the second highest paid player in the entire league. Only Mahomes paid more. Do you have concerns that you won't be able to retain some of your other talent when you're thinking about some young talented players that you might want to be extending in the next couple of years? Do you worry about that? And do you think that Dak will struggle if you can't surround him with that talent that you've got at the moment?
I think I don't think it'll be Dak who will necessarily be the struggle on that side of it. It might be where it impacts other areas of our team, but also at the same time, it's how the cap is split, how they end up making that work. Because obviously I know that Zeke's on quite a high wage as well, but that might, again, it all depends on how they do that internally. But yeah, those two might cross paths. I believe that was what the issue was in the first place, was that Zeke obviously got paid quite highly, and then can you do the same for Dak? And he has got it, and it is working out at the moment. But hopefully it doesn't impact the team going down the line. I did see on a really optimistic Cowboy side of things, that our ideal offense now is being able to potentially either hope that Pitts falls down, or we trade up to get him, so we have this ultimate offense going into next season, which could be really exciting. That's an offense that I think a lot of people would want to see, with that final missing piece of a really strong tight end, and like we discussed, potential wide receiver fit for him as well. So that could be brilliant. And it's also like some really nice stats for Dak as well, for this, like, out of that draft class, he's like the last remaining to be at his picked team after all the trades of this offseason. And it's quite nice, I suppose, in terms of rivalry, that he's earning 21 million this year, while Carson Wentz is still being paid 34 million by the Eagles to play for another team, which is just quite nice on the rivalry point of view as well within the division. So no, it is really exciting. Yeah, I just hope it means that, like, it isn't what you're saying, that it has an impact on the future of the club in terms of who we can't keep, but more about what we can build around Dak being the center of the center of our team, putting our faith into him, and can we create a team that is successful around him.
Thanks, Connor. Wow. Yeah, let's see. Hopefully bright things for Cowboys, and Dak stays healthy this year. We get to see really what that offense could look like. Probably Zeke doesn't last much longer there, I would imagine. But I know you're a fan of Tony Pollard, so maybe you wouldn't be too.
I'm like, to be honest, I'm a huge fan of Zeke and Tony Pollard. Zeke was like, it was Dak and Zeke when I first got into supporting the Cowboys. Like the game I went to in America, they both featured in. I've got a Zeke shirt. Like, literally, I absolutely love the guy. I think he was absolutely fantastic for us, and I just hope it isn't the end of him in some senses of it, because he was fantastic for us when he had that defensive line the offensive line that he came into, when he was fantastic that year, and I know he was hugely appreciative of them as well. But I just hope it spurs competition within our running backs. Obviously, Tony Pollard was fantastic last season to fill the place, but it just would be strange to see those two not together. They're almost like a brotherhood, those two, with Dak and Zeke. So we will just see what the impact is. I'm very big on both, and just really excited now to see what the strength of the offense can be next season, and hopefully a better season to come.
Thanks, Connor. I would just like to add that I could have been a running back in the NFL behind that offensive line. So let's
Well,
take out. The other thing which happened before we talk about some cuts, Trent Brown got traded to the Patriots and the Raiders, offensive tackle. Obviously, their big plan this offseason is to get Jimmy Garoppolo reportedly, so that would be interesting. But then we had 3 cuts which Chris told us about. So John Brown got cut from the Bills, Emmanuel Sanders from the Saints, and Malcolm Butler from the Titans. It obviously makes that wide receiver class free agent group even more deep. And then obviously we just had the tag deadline. So we already touched on Dak. He got tagged, and then they gave him that big deal. Taylor Moton, the offensive tackle for the Panthers, who we discussed, got tagged. Chicago Bears tagged Allen Robinson. We also said about that. Justin Simmons got tagged by Denver Broncos. Cam Robinson surprisingly got tagged by the Jaguars. Next one on the list is Marcus Williams, safety for the Saints, who got tagged. There were 3 safeties total who got tagged, including Marcus May for the New York Jets. Obviously, we discussed Marcus May too. We had Leonard Williams, defensive line from the Giants, also discussed him. He got tagged. Chris Godwin surprisingly got tagged by the Bucks, but again, we talked about him. And Brandon Scherr for the Washington football team, right guard. I actually think everyone had written off the potential for Brandon Scherr to get tagged, because I believe that was his second tag season in a row. Am I correct, Henry?
I think so, yeah. It wasn't one that we had on our list, but yeah, very good, like good list of players there that got tagged. Clearly, teams struggling with the cap, I guess, or struggling with doing a long-term deal with the uncertainty of the cap, maybe, or players not wanting to take the the deal at the reduced rate. But yeah, interesting how many good players on the tag. It seems like an unusual amount, but I think we were pretty accurate on our predictions there. Seem to have got quite a few right. And yeah, you're right about the receiver class as well, Josh. That's it's a very good class, both in the draft and free agency now.
Yeah, which speaks volumes to the way the NFL's going, right? I mean, now each team needs 3 viable receiving threats. So, hopefully there's this influx of talent, and yeah, we're seeing it now. Yeah, it will be an interesting free agency. I think we're all looking forward to that. Obviously, probably more cuts coming, I would imagine, too. People making space, and you're right, Henry, this salary cap is massively affecting a lot of teams because it's gone down quite a lot, which it hasn't done for a long time, obviously because of COVID. So before we go back and we kind of touch on this week's In the Slot Buster, is there anyone in particular, as the Packers fan that you are, Henry, that you would kind of view as the number 1 receiving ideal prospect in the draft or in the free agency, or both?
Yeah, so I think you guys know how I feel about Kadarius Toney. So if we don't get someone in free agency, he would be my guy in the first round with that pick. In free agency, we've been linked a lot with Will Fuller, and as a prospect on the field, really, really keen on that fit. Very, very interesting, and I think that would work really, really well. With the injury history and the PED ban, I'm not so keen. So I would be a little hesitant on that Will Fuller connection. I think it's probably really unlikely, considering he's just leaving Detroit. But Kenny Golladay would be amazing for us. It's a different kind of receiver, and I think that would be a really, really intriguing one. Actually, the whole Detroit receiving core is leaving, so I wouldn't mind Marvin Jones or Danny Amendola, to be fair, any of those. But we didn't tag Aaron Jones and we didn't tag Corey Linsley. Corey Linsley is our all-pro center. He's a big priority. If we can get him back, I would love to see him back.
Can I just ask, obviously, you got Devin Funchess, didn't play this year, opted out. Would you see him as the second option, obviously, to Devonta Adams, or would you expect him to be the third if you did get someone like Will Fuller?
Yeah, honestly, my expectations for Funchess are zero. If he makes the team, then he's done fine. I don't expect him to sort of see the field with any regularity at the moment. I don't think he'll be there come the regular season. But if he does, that's great. I think he'll have a hard time beating out Alan Lazard and MVS. To be honest, when we last see him on the field and then he's missed a full year. So low expectations for Funchess at the moment.
Yeah, and Kenny Golladay is a popular trending pick to go to the Packers at the moment. I know a few different destinations, but yeah, it'll be interesting off season. Hopefully you do address wide receiver, Henry. I know you're desperate for that. Connor, why don't you take us back through this week's In the Slot podcast, In the Slot Buster for the In the Slot podcast?
Absolutely. So this week's cryptic clue, one last time. Make sure you do get your guesses in the comment section below and on Twitter. But the cryptic clue for this week is: you may see me fighting a dragon, or you may see me with the entire team's jerseys. So I'll let you guys think for that for a week. And yeah, hopefully we get some guesses this week from people who are listening. And I'm looking forward to hearing Josh, Chris, and Henry take me through what their guesses are and their thought process going into this. I think one thing actually to highlight as well with it is it was really interesting every week how you all think down a slightly different line, but kind of ultimately come back to very reasonable answers, I suppose, with what you could with where your thought process took you. So we are hoping to see that from people who are listening as well, as to how you perceive this clue.
It was the first week, I think, where one of us has guessed it and not realised that we guessed it. So congratulations to Chris for that accomplishment. Do remember to obviously like, subscribe, follow our content. Do guess what you think it is, and you get a micro mini pocket helmet of the team of your choice. We'll send it out to you in the post. Thanks again.